Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and we're bringing back one of the most famous creators we have ever had on our show, if you count numbers of time they've been on. Ganesh Cherian. Welcome, Ganesh.
It's great to be here, and what a great introduction. I feel very honored that I get a lot of your time, Gene. You're a very enjoyable person to spend time with, and actually get to do a podcast. That's fair.
Yeah, almost like the Saturday Night Live where they have the 5 times of guest hosting. You're nearing the 5 times as a guest.
Wow, I'm honored. I'm honored.
So anyhow, Ganesh is presenting at Sunstone, and this episode is called Sunstone Sneak Peek. And so, Ganesh, let's start with when and where you're going to give your presentation. So I know it's at like the University of Utah this time, just in case you get lost.
That's correct. I haven't been there, so I need to go, do a bit of reconnaissance. My presentation is on the Friday, the 2nd of August at 12:20 p.m. through to 1:20. So it's an hour-long session. I'm planning to do about 40 minutes and then do some Q&A for 20 minutes. So if any of these things resound with you and you'd like to know some things or discuss them, it's a good place to do it. And I'm really excited about presenting, but I really enjoy the interaction that happens when you get to hear what other people are scratching out in their head because of what you've brought up, and then maybe dissecting that, but also collaborating because there's some intelligent people around who have thought about these things in ways that I haven't, and when I get to hear their voice and what they're thinking about, oftentimes it's a spark. It's innovative. You learn things in the moment, and I love that kind of really interactive, learning space, particularly from other people.
About how long ago did you decide that you were going to do a Sunstone presentation?
So I thought that if I was going to come all the way to a Sunstone, I'd like to be able to present some of my ideas. But gosh, they called for papers earlier in the year, and I've been working on a few things that I thought were quite interesting, and I just submit a brief, and they tell you yes or no, and all those kinds of things. So hopefully, and my brief was basically the kinds of things that I've been working on, particularly with the Book of Mormon, have really been around the autobiographical nature of the text and how Joseph is using his own life as the story base for the Christian adventure story that he is creating. And one of the interesting things about that is that you can reverse engineer that. So if you can know what the history was, what the events were that were happening in his life that he's using as a base, and then you can see what he's made a story out of and how he's expressed that. Then you can go back and you can look at the elements of the story and what the reality was, and then tease out things that give you insights into Joseph Smith's mind, things that you may not know about him, but you can infer from the kinds of words that he's using and the way that he's expressing these particular ideas. You can kind of get an idea of what maybe has happened to him that you don't know about, or the kinds of things that are occupying his mind, the ways that he's feeling about various things. And we just don't have that a lot in his journals later on in his life. And he's slightly candid, but a lot of those have been, taken and revised and polished and things like that. But you can find a little bit of his, his unique self in it. But
touching on that for a second.
Yeah.
It made me wonder about the story of Laban.
Yes.
Did something that we don't know about that Joseph did that caused him to write that story?
Yes, I have a theory about that actually. And I think it's pretty robust. But actually, that's not what I'm going to be talking about at Sunstone. But yes, it is an autobiographical story. I don't mean that he killed anybody, but I think he metaphorically killed somebody. And I think that he was very angry. And that story allowed him to express his anger in
I think I know the story, but we're going to have everybody buy your book when it comes out. We'll say later this year, and we'll tease that And so tell us more about your presentation then. You said it was going to be a little bit of a presentation, a little bit of question and answer, right?
Yeah, so look, I've got 40 minutes, so I could talk for hours, of course, on the subject. So I have to pick a couple of examples that I think are really telling in the text that we may not have explored about him, and we just don't know about him. Because the Book of Mormon really is Joseph's first project. We have, he had many other things that he did. He was a treasure sinker, of course, and he told lots of stories we know, but we don't have any of them. There's only really one, and that's in his 1828-26 trial, where some people relate what he has said to them.
A historian would say this is the extent.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It exists, and so this is what we have.
This is what we have. And then, so then we have, the only things that we have about him is the Book of Mormon. So he's writing the Book of Mormon, he's creating it, he's speaking it, actually he's performing it, right? And hopefully I've done a good job through some of my other podcasts of really showing, particularly with William Davis's work, that he's performing the Book of Mormon. He's doing it in the moment, which means that he's, and we've talked about this before, he's like a comedy sketch. He's got material prepared. He knows where the story is going. He knows what the punchlines are. He's got things that he's going to hit depending on, what kind of impact he thinks he's going to make.
The heads that...
William.
Yeah.
Or Bill, actually. He's a lovely guy. He served his mission. He served his mission in the same mission as I did, just before me. So we have a very close connection. Then so Joseph has an outline. He has an understanding of where the story is going. He's on the day that he's performing, and he's really performing particularly to the scribe who he's got in front of him, like Oliver Cowdery. But he also has a wider audience. There might be other people in the house or surround, so he's conscious of them. Plus, there's the wider community of people who are nearby, who are interested in what he's saying, and they're reading it sometimes in the moment, sometimes that same day. So he's very conscious of what those things are. But in the performance aspect, in the moment, in front of Oliver Cowdery or another scribe, he is performing the Book of Mormon, and he's using elements of his life, he's using elements of the Bible, and he's creating it and weaving it into this Christian adventure story that becomes the Book of Mormon. And amongst that, and talking about some of his experiences in this kind of trumped up kind of way, he reveals a few things about himself in the text, particularly by the words he uses. And to give you an example, when he's talking about the priests of Noah who are stealing the Lamanite daughters, he talks about he uses the word ashamed. They're ashamed to go back to their wives and families. And so they steal the daughters. Now, this is very much what happens to Joseph, because he's told his family that he's going to go marry Emma Hale. And then when he gets to the Hale farm and presents himself to his father-in-law, he says, look, there's no way that you're marrying my daughter. He uses the word a stranger. You're a stranger. I don't like what you do. You're not of my faith. I can't trust you. There's no way you're going to have a bar of my daughter. And he goes back to he goes dejected to Colesville, and ashamed. He's ashamed, and he's ashamed to go back to his family and say, "Oh gosh, I told you." It didn't work out. So he goes and steals Emma. So you get this really interesting dynamic in the story where he uses words to help you understand it. He's really feeling these feelings. Joseph is feeling ashamed, and and this gives you an understanding of the motivations behind what he does, and how it plays out in his life. And this is his marriage, right? The beginning of his marriage works with this kind of thing where, I'm ashamed. And that confrontation with Isaac Hale and his conviction of Joseph, I think really plays into that Abinadi story, to the point where, Joseph is convicted by what Isaac Hale says, and he really makes a change. You know, he has to kind of give up treasure digging anyway. He's got this kind of criminal record now about it, but he's really convicted by Isaac Hale, and the way that Isaac Hale is just this really good person, somebody that he respects and admires, who doesn't want to have anything to do with him, doesn't want him in his family, does not want to. And so Joseph he has to change. He's Alma, you know, who is convicted by what Abinadi says, and who makes a massive change in his life. And so this is in the text of the Book of Mormon, and we can learn so much about Joseph and what's actually happening to him. Now, we don't have the story. I mean, we have a first vision account. We have the idea that he's convicted of sins, and the idea, you know, we have that, and we have lots of reminiscences from his mother, you know, in 1845. But we don't have the story of going to, from his side at least. We have it from Isaac Hale, because Isaac Hale talks about this in his affidavit. But we don't have it from Joseph Smith's perspective, except in the Book of Mormon. And in the Book of Mormon, when you start to read the text and understand how he's feeling, and you can empathize with him. You know, what young man who has set himself out on this task to get this woman that he thinks is a little bit beyond him, right, who he thinks will improve his life, because he's missing Alvin, because Alvin's dead, and that was his best friend, you know, his older brother. And Emma is maybe the closest person, you know, the person he thinks who will save him from his loneliness. He goes to make advances towards her, and then his father-in-law says, look, you're just not good enough for my girl, go away. And so he has to steal her. And the way that works in his psyche to, you know, convict him of his, you know, thing, I think plays out really interestingly in his life. And we just have no, we just don't have that. So those kinds of things. So I'm going to talk about a few examples like that particular one, but also another one where you can kind of get an understanding of Joseph from the text of the Book of Mormon, how he feels about certain things, what is being influenced by his culture, of course. That's a lot what my book talks about, which hopefully will be out in the next few weeks so you can have it. But also that understanding of, gosh, how does this play out? And that's why the characters in the story seem so real. The Book of Mormon seems so, because they're based on him. They're based on the people that he's around.
His emotions that would come from all his experiences.
And when he's performing it in the moment to his scribe, Oliver Cowdery, you know, I mean, he's got an idea of what he's going to say, and he's crafted into this adventure story, but there are moments where he's lost in the story and he's recalling his feelings, and those little tells in the text give you this wonderful insight into who he was and maybe what influenced him and how he made some, you know, changes in his life.
That's right. I might be crazy, but often, I had a job once at a metal saw company, and there was this character that was one of the operators, and he would just come in and he had his hair back, and his name was Todd. And I thought, and all the things that happened within each coworker, you know, the little twists and turns in our relationships and stories that would come out from, you know, at their exploits in the real world, not working, because everybody wants to not work.
Yeah.
And so you tell everybody at work what your other life is like. And there was exciting things, you know, some guy had a van that was, you know, like a woman catcher van, you know, kind of a thing. He was a playa, you know, and I thought there could be a sitcom, right, called Oh Todd. And it would be about this workplace where it would have all these interactions between all these people, and it would have the stories that come out. And so, and other things like that. There are stories, I think, that happen to me that, boy, that would make a good movie, right? All this stuff would make a good movie. Like just my relationship with you is probably 20, 50 seconds of a really good movie, right?
But I hope I get at least 30 seconds of that. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And so anyhow, but at the same time, authors, when they normally their first book is autobiographical in some type of way, right? They
course.
tell a story that has to do with their lived experiences. Because how could you write about something you didn't know about, right? You do research, whatever. You got that going on. And then you also have what I've been telling people. We only really know about 47 minutes of Joseph Smith's life. And our minds have to fill in all the rest. We hear a quote, and then we know that for 2 hours he gave a sermon, but we only know that quote of the whole sermon, right? That we actually study. Now, somebody can go and read the whole sermon sometimes that scribes are writing down. But like when the scribes say, Joseph translated this way, right? Or some other people said he did it this way. More than likely, he did everything possible he could to write a book. That's what I would do. I would use the internet. Nowadays, I would use AI. So if I ever write a book, it's going to be AI helping me. Yep. But anyway, so he probably did meet with people and hash out a storyline, right? There's evidence that people talk about him and some guys going to a cave and maybe who knows what they did. And there'd be like remnants of them being there, like bones and stuff from them eating, their lunch, chicken bones and other things, the candle lights in the room would be going on at 3 a.m. in the morning when somebody's like driving by and stuff. And so maybe he was hashing some things out, but it would still seem to the scribes that he was magical because he was still performing a lot. And maybe he did look in the hat and had some notes, but he was still performing it. And it was still amazing. Even if they knew that he brought in the 1769 edition of the King James Version or whatever it is, all the other stuff around it would still be magical, right? Nobody says, yeah, he used this book sometimes, but we know he used the book because he says words in it exactly in Second Nephi or whatever, right?
The text tells us a lot about what's going on in the moment. Like I think that's something that William Davis obviously has given us as a framework to look at the Book of Mormon. And then once you start to see it, you start to see it everywhere. And that gives you such an insight into what's happening in the moment, because it is a performance. He's performing it, and then it's really, I mean, aside from spelling errors and grammar, that's it. Like it's done. It's not heavily edited. It's not revised. It's not polished. That is the moment. So the words matter. The kinds of words that he was using, really matter. They give you an insight into it. When you see, or in other words, he's made a mistake and he's correcting it in the moment. And so you can go back and see, well, what was the mistake? Why did he make it? What was his thought pattern? Did he get lost in the moment as he was orating, or did he think that and then think, oh, that wasn't how I wanted to say it? So there's actually quite a lot of really basic analysis you can do when you understand that the words he's using, the context, who's in front of him, where he is, that they all make a difference to what gets performed. And it'd be kind of like taking a famous comedian and going, okay, in his career, he performed here, and look at his performance at this point. You can see that he's struggling with the death of his father, or and here, look at this performance here. It just won an Oscar, and
that's right. He's hit it big now.
He's hit it big. So you can see those little tells in people's performance. When they are affected by what's going on in the moment, and that's exactly what the Book of Mormon is, and why it becomes incredibly fascinating,
right,
as a piece of literature, because it slightly examines this man. I mean, sure, we've got to get past the idea that this is Joseph Smith, and he may not have been a mystic prophet like we have been conditioned to feel, and that this may actually be him. But when you get past that and you start to look at it as
once you can free your mind from conditioning,
then it becomes a
fascinating,
a detective story, right? What can I learn about Joseph by the text of the Book of Mormon? How can I reverse engineer the text to understand what is happening in his life, and to explore stories which are not told anywhere else about him? Because either they the stuff that happened to him in Bainbridge,
there wasn't the stuff around. And so I guess you've been using the 1830 words that he's putting down a lot.
Generally, I think that you can use the modern version, and then sometimes when things kind of stick out or they're a little odd, if you go back to the printer's edition, is quite good, because you can see that because the printer's edition gives you it would be marvelous if we had the original manuscript, and we've only got a short part of that, because that actually would show you what's happening in the moment, crossing out,
right, because they're cross outs, or
so we don't have that. Which is such
a 400 word sentence and then a period.
Yeah, exactly. But the printer's manuscript is close. You can glean a lot from the printer's manuscript, and there are definitely a few corrections and deletions and things like that give you some insight. So it is.
And I remember hearing about that there was 3,000 corrections, and people said, well, yeah, he orated it, and maybe Oliver Cowdery didn't know where the paragraphs were, or the commas, or the periods, and so the printer was trained as an editor in the same way, and probably had lots of, we'll say, rubes, countrymen, right, that not as literate as we are today, and I would fit in perfectly back then. He's making these corrections. Say, okay, so that now we know what he did to those things. But it always make me wonder about all the corrections since then. Why would we change words that God told Joseph and to use some other word now, because we now live in the 21st century or something like that? Why wouldn't God have known that 17 million members would be around in the 21st century, and that's more than the 300,000 all throughout the 1800s, or the 5 million all throughout the 1900s? The word should have been for today more, right? But anyhow, that's just my judging God. If he can do it, I can do it. Fair play is what I say.
Oh my gosh, look, that's the thing that kind of got me to do the book in the first place, was going, hang on, there are some things in the Book of Mormon that just don't end up in Nauvoo, right? So this is 10 years later. Did God, not, he could spend thousands of years preparing a secondary manuscript for the lost text, right? But he can't see 10 years into the future that
there's going to be an endowment.
Yeah, that's right. So where's the endowment in the baptisms for the dead?
Dallin Oaks says famously, there's the apology doesn't exist in the Bible, so we don't apologize. Okay, endowment doesn't exist in the Book of Mormon, so why are we doing endowments? So anyway,
it's slightly maddening, but when you start to realize the Book of Mormon is Joseph at 23 years old in 1829, and the sermons that he's giving in Nauvoo is what he's feeling at 35 to 38. This is him, right? And we built our whole lives around him. He's the background character. So why not?
One of the few authors that wrote his magnum opus first.
Yes. And that's fascinating.
And he's a creator, right? We have creators all the time. If he was alive today, I'd have him on my show.
Oh, right? he would be doing podcasts, several times a day. He'd have his own. He'd be
in demand.
Yeah,
that's right. Well, you know what? Everybody go to Sunstone first of all, and then go and see Ganesh's performance. We'll call your thing a performance.
Yes,
and we'll say almost nobody famous is talking at the same time as his thing. So don't worry. Don't even look at the schedule. Just look for Ganesh's name and just go right to that room, and you'll be happy, right? Yeah. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Like and subscribe, and call for more authors, or more presenters to come onto our show. and we'll see what happens. It's in what 13 days. 13 days, I think, is starting. Thanks, Ganesh, again for coming on the show. Bye, everybody. Have a good rest of the week. But
Thanks,
you go ahead.